Stephen Sharper, Associate Professor at the School of Environment at the University of Toronto and the Department of Anthropology at University of Toronto at Mississauga, and most recently, Director of Integrated Sustainability Initiative at Trinity College. And only months ago, we learned that a graduate student fellowship of UTM's Master of Science and Sustainability Management had been created in your name. Full disclosure, you and I recently co-published a book called The Green Bible, Words of Love for a Suffering Planet. Stephen, we are interested in learning more about positive transformation, change and sustainability, eco change that is sustainable and just. And we know that you've been doing a lot of work on this, a lot of thinking and writing. Could you talk to us more about that?
Yes, thanks, Simon. It's great to see you. Great to be with you here, and delighted to collaborate on another conversation. So this is delightful. And I'll first just begin with where I am. I'm at the Canadian Ecology Centre in Mattawa, Ontario, and it's nestled among the 300-year-old white pines, the howling wolves, and the meandering moose of the Ottawa-Mattawa River Valley here in the Samuel de Champlain Provincial Park. And I'm just going to turn the camera briefly to Brother Fire, because Brother Fire is part of this conversation in ways that are still a mystery to me. But when we talk about positive eco-change and long-range sustainability transformation, we have to reflect on our own selves and our personal sustainability. And sustaining ourselves spiritually, physically, psychically, emotionally is as important as the placard raising, protesting, lobbying, transformative, crap disturbing work we do in public. And so I want to just tell 3 stories to get us into this conversation. And the first is well known, and that is the story of Rachel Carson. But there are aspects of the story that are lesser known. Rachel Carson, former head of the Fish and Wildlife Service as editor-in-chief for the US government, was a beautiful writer. And when she wrote her book, The Sea Around Us, it became a bestseller on the New York Times. It enabled her to quit her job and devote herself to full-time writing. But she got a letter from Miss Olga Hutchins, who was talking about how a plane came over spreading toxic chemicals, DDT and/or other chemicals, over a bird sanctuary near her home, and thousands of birds went into toxic shock and died. The beginnings of that letter led to Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, published in 1962, which changed the landscape of the environmental field ever since. What's interesting in this story of change is not just the incredible courage and insight and gifts of Rachel Carson, but all those along the way that made that transformation possible. I call it a chain of courage. So, she proposes an article on DDT to Reader's Digest. They turn her down. She realizes this is going to be a book project. Her agent supports her, and she proposes it to Houghton Mifflin. Houghton Mifflin contracts the book, says, we're looking forward to it. They get menacing letters from Velsicol, a chemical company that wants to squash the book, saying she's an alarmist, she's in a league with communism, she's not a real scientist, and she's hysterical. But they didn't buckle. The editors at Houghton Mifflin said, no, she's a vetted author, we're going ahead. As the book was taking shape, scientists from various labs around North America sent her surreptitiously information. Some of them were fired for doing so. Others said that was the most important thing they ever did, was secretly send Rachel Carson information. The New Yorker decided to run pre-publication excerpts before the book was officially launched. When they came out with the first selection, they got menacing letters from the chemical companies. If you continue to do this, we'll sue you. She's an alarmist, hysterical woman, not a real scientist, and bordering on being a communist. they said, we're going ahead. The book is published and became a sensation. But the chemical industry was not amused. And Dr. Robert White Stevens of American Cyanamid became the chief spokesperson against her book and did over 80 lectures in 1962 against Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. CBS News decides to do an interview with her. 2 weeks before the broadcast, they send out their publicity. They get 1,000 mimeographed letters saying, be careful with this thing. She's not what she says she is. Now, one of the producers says, I'm pretty sure it came from the chemical companies, but I can't say for sure. But it was the old Gestetner machines. Remember those, Simon, with the purple ink? And as kids, we go into the grammar room secretary office just to smell the fumes. Anyway, pre-Xerox days. So anyway, they get 1,000 of these. They're still going ahead. 2 days before the broadcast, all the advertisers for the interview pull out. We're not supporting this show. But CBS News, which wasn't at that time owned by a larger conglomerate such as Viacom, they said, no, we're going ahead. Eric Severide interviews Rachel Carson. At home, watching on his living room TV, is Senator Abraham Ribikoff from Connecticut, a Democrat. Now, I don't know if he read Silent Spring or if he read the excerpts in The New Yorker, but he saw that program. The next day, he calls for hearings on the use of DDT in the U.S. Senate. This leads to the banning of DDT use in the United States and later Canada. Each of those moments represents a link in a chain of courage. People doing their job, not acting as fantastic heroes with capes, but people of integrity doing what they think is right in accordance with their jobs and their vocations. That helped make the modern environmental movement. And this chain of courage is something that we have to keep in mind as we move in transformative ecological change. It's not simply the incredible valiant heroes and heroines, such as a Rachel Carson or a Greta Thunberg. It's all of us acting with integrity, doing our jobs, even when faced with some adversity. A more Ontario-based story. In 1999, I was teaching ENV 222 with a team of other professors from the social sciences, economics, natural sciences, etc. Our lingua franca among all those disciplines was the Ontario Medical Association smog report, which outlined how many people were dying each year owing to smog. And at that time, there were over 50 smog alerts every year on average in Ontario. It was miserable. So we invited Jack Gibbons into class, a U of T graduate who had started the Ontario Clean Air Alliance. And Jack says to our class of several hundred, our aim is to close all coal-fired plants in Ontario. You see the eyes rolls and students laughing like, yeah, right, that's going to happen. What has he been smoking? Fast forward to 2014, when Jack Gibbons, Premier Kathleen Wynne are joined by Al Gore at the Mars Center at U of T campus, announcing the closure of the last coal-fired plant in Ontario. To date, Ontario is the only major jurisdiction in North America that has eliminated coal-fired plants. And the number of smog alerts since that time has been next to nil, something that was laughable in 1999 was done in 2014. And all of us are benefiting from that moment. Part of that chain of courage and integrity were those in the medical field who saw the medical implications, and those in the economic field who, with a publicly supported healthcare system, realized this is causing a huge hit on our taxpayers.